Brunch. That's how we say brunch.
Here's to the ladies who say basic with their lunch. Be a queen.
Be a boss.
Ladies who brunch and pop it off.
Hey, we pop and pop it off. We pop.
All right. The episode's about to...
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ladies Who Brunch. I am Julissa.
What's good, everybody? This is Skittles.
And this week, it took entirely too long for this moment to come, and it's totally our fault. But this week, we have somebody who, all right, I'm going to give a deeper intro this week. Because really, really, truly, and I've said this before, but I'm going to reiterate it again on your episode. Somebody who really inspires me. And somebody who really motivates me to continue doing the work that I do and to stand grounded in my truth as I do the work that I do. And somebody who I will never forget, parent-teacher conference, my father was outside talking to her mother in Spanish. I was like, who he found? And it was Catherine's mama, LAZO. Who the fuck are you?
Oh, my God. What's good, everybody? I'm Cat. No, hello, everyone. I'm Cat LAZO. I am a host. I'm a producer. I'm a director. A lot of folks probably know me from the series that I developed called The Cat Call, a video series that debunks the misconceptions about Latinos, Latinx.
Yes.
And I am also a friend of both Julissa and Skittles.
Yes.
I'm sure we're going to get into that, maybe, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we met at LaGuardia High School.
Yes.
You was 1 year above us, but she was very kind. She was not one of those people who were like above, like senior to you, who like treated you like shit, or at least me. I didn't get that like bullying. We were in the same department. We were in the drama department. Who were your 3 teachers actually, or 4 teachers rather?
Oh my God. Okay, so just a heads up. I don't know if people know this about me, but I do have very bad memory. So here we go. So Mr. L, aka Lobenhofer, Richard Harden, R.I.P. No.
Did you have Nagel?
I didn't have Nagel. I think I only had L and
Harden. Sort of
and then I
interchangeably.
would sneak
Moody?
into who?
Moody? Mr. James
No,
Moody.
I was just going to say I would sneak into Mr. Moody's not his classes, but his lunchtime.
Ooh,
so I don't know if you remember, but
yeah.
he would basically have lunch in the like drama department, but like in the classes. And I just felt like I never had him as a teacher. And honestly, like he was the only
black dude.
Only black person, only black teacher. So I was just like, let me just sit in during these lunches and just, observe and interact and
soak in
take
all the Moody gems.
Yes.
He's an interesting man. Shout out to James Moody. So you mentioned the Cat Call and some of the work that you do. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to move away from just doing acting and taking on a fuller suite of talents.
So when I was younger, obviously, I went to LaGuardia because I wanted to be an actress. And to try to make a long story short, I really, LaGuardia was for me, it was a space where I felt very safe-ish. We had lots of colorblind casting.
Right.
So in a world, outside where folks would cast based on strictly your race, your ethnicity, my experience at LaGuardia was one where it was here, any roles, whatever, take it, do it, even if it was even gender, it was
right.
Fuck it up, switch it up. And then I graduated. I had a manager and an agent. FYI, all of this was also navigating, to put people more in context, I'm navigating this as, how old are you when you graduate? 18?
18.
Yeah.
I'm 18, navigating this by myself, unlike the other people that I went to school with who, had parents who were in the industry, who were either already working in the theater district or, had parents who were actors or who were producers or who were casting agents or whatever the hell. I had no context for that. So I was literally 18-year-old me going into an agent's office and signing a contract and being I don't know what the fuck I'm signing.
Right.
So navigating that and then walking into auditions as an 18-year-old girl who was still very much developing her own identity as a whole, still developing also her critical thinking skills as it revolved around identity, gender, race, and all of that stuff, and walking into like casting rooms where, you know, majority of the time, if not all the time, it was like, you know, white men who were the casting directors. And I noticed, I think for me, like a big point of the development of, like, I guess my critical thinking when it comes to quote unquote Latinidad and colorism that exists within us, you know, had to do with my experiences in those casting rooms. Because I would go, you know, for roles, for, you know, the Latina role, and I would see how sometimes the rooms would start out mixed, you know, like in terms of a hue. You saw women who looked like me, you know, I would say quintessential Latina looking, you know, light brown, straightish hair. And there were, like, you know, other women in there who were darker. But then as the casting calls would happen and you had the second callback, I noticed, I'm like, wait a second, everybody got a whole lot lighter now. Like, to the point where I was like, am I the darkest person in here? And so, and that's an issue. I know you can't see me because this is a podcast, but I'm pretty fair. And so I say that to say that, like, I would enter these spaces and my presence, I noticed folks were accepting, but then, you know, being like, you're not Latina enough. And like the nuances in that too, right? Because I'm Colombian and I'm half Colombian, half Peruvian. And New York is a very like Caribbean centric space when it comes to Latinos, because they are the dominant Latino. Shout out to Dominicans. Dominicans, Puerto Ricans. And so I think, like, and then you have like the overall general Latino representation, which is like mainly like Mexican, right? And so I'm neither. I'm none of those. And so when I walked into spaces, people were confused by my accent. Also because I have, you know, two parents with two different accents. My accent when I speak Spanish is different, and I'm Americanized, so I have like a really white girl Spanish accent that's like maybe a little Colombian, maybe a little Peruvian, maybe a little like nothing. And so people would just be like, that was, I don't know, but like, can you say that a little more urban? I remember, I know I'm like, now I'm running. I don't even remember what you asked me, but I have a vivid memory, and I have very little vivid memories. The first audition I ever went on, and I was younger than 18, I think I had to go with a parent legally, was for a PSA to encourage kids to not skip school. I never saw this PSA, and I also didn't follow it. But and the commercial was something along the lines of like a young girl is calling out to her friend from her friend is like up in an apartment, and her friend is being like, "Hey, come out! You should come to school." And I remember I did it probably something like that, and the casting director was like, "That was great. Now, can you say it a little more urban?" And that was the first time I ever heard that sentence. And I was like, and it goes to show you, you know, like I was offended, but at the same time, I was like, I know exactly what you want. I was like, "Hey, girl, can you please come to school, please?" And so I say this to say that was like back-to-back auditions that were like that, where I think it was outsiders, men, it was non-Latino people who were basically judging not your acting skills, because when you are a non-white actor, no one is really, at least entry-level acting, no one is judging your acting. Everyone's judging how well you fit into that stereotype, you know? And so that took a really, really big emotional toll on me, and I just was like, this is not for me. I'm done. This is chipping away at my emotional health. And I just started working behind the camera. I'm self-taught. I've literally taught myself how to edit, how to film, the mechanics of a camera via YouTube.
Right.
Like, honestly,
you and
YouTube.
Skittles both.
Just
Yeah.
like YouTube tutorials. In college, like I didn't have a big desktop. I don't even think I had a laptop at that moment. And I would sit in at the computer lab, like during my lunch breaks or the gaps that I had in between classes. And they had all of like the fancy software, like Adobe and whatnot. And I would take it, you know, on me, and I would just like sit there for hours, just like using the software while watching tutorials to try to teach myself. And yeah, from there, I mean, I'm laughing at myself now because I know I started this by saying, like, to make a long story short, I just made a YouTube channel and implemented the skills that I learned. And then folks kind of caught on that there was someone who knew what she was doing with a camera, you know, built up my my freelance career.
Right.
And from there just got hired by other folks, including Me Too, and that's where the cat call came out.
Yeah.
That was not a short story.
No,
guys.
but
it was a worthwhile journey.
Yeah.
Like, to hear, like, what you went through and how it really came about, and to know that it wasn't just something that you just woke up one day and was like, I want to make these empowering videos. It was literally like your experience as a woman that influenced.
Yeah, and I think, and even a step further than that, because I remember like when I had first and like started seeing that your like content was coming out, like, and I think this was even, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it was before Stuart Weitzman or maybe after I had left Stuart Weitzman, because fun fact, we also worked at a shoe store together when we were in college. You know, so I couldn't, but I remember when I saw it, and I was just, and I remember thinking like, oh wow, I didn't even know Kat was so passionate about these things, and I remember thinking it was super dope, and then thinking like, oh, okay, and it makes sense because like she's a Latina, but she's a little ambiguous. So of course, marketing wise, like it makes sense that she would get cast. That's dope. Not knowing the context until we like reconnected and started working together more, and like you had reconnected with Skittles, and we went to the YouTube thing, that I started to really understand. Oh no, she's a boss bitch. Like she literally like created this for herself. It was not that she fit, and this is going back because like in LaGuardia, like in our last year, you do this like audition showcase and like, you know, to see if agents will want you and stuff like that. And I very much, similar to Kat's experience, was like, you know, the way people want me to present when I have a piece of paper in front of me, they want me to read it the way they see me and how I look. And so I often, and being like a larger woman than a lot of the other women around me, and not even just fat, I mean like tall and like just bigger in general, I'd always get roles. So either they were like, oh, but she sounds too nice to be like bullyish. So then they're like, we don't really know what to do with you. So I'm always like that like friend, like that like ride or die friend who's just like really smart, but also like really meek and like doesn't see herself as beautiful and blah, blah, blah. And it was a typecast where it was kind of like, yeah, well, that some of that is true to who I am as a person, but like, why does that have to be the kind of black woman I am? Because I'm not outrageous enough to be like this big, like, you know, bully girl, but I'm not meek enough, or I'm not small enough and poised enough to be your Juliet to the Romeo, right? So like it was very weird, and I just didn't fuck with it immediately because I knew what they didn't know about me. And so I went through like my first, I would say like 2 to 3 years out of LaGuardia, spent a lot of time internalizing that and seeing some of our other peers' success and being like, yeah, they're super talented, but that makes sense because the way this world is set up for them, that's why they also got it. And like, and feeling like this, that like not understanding the work that people still, even amongst the privilege that they may or may not have to work through. So I think it's really important that like that part of your story is always highlighted, because it's very easy to be like, oh, of course Kat makes sense. And you do make sense. You're fucking talented, but this is coming from you. This is not somebody putting a script in your hand and saying, hey Kat, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that, okay, yes, that is really important for people to understand, because often I do get comments of like, oh, okay, like I'm just a personality. It takes me off when people say I'm either an influencer or a personality, when there's so much work that I put into the videos that you see.
You don't just show up as talent and say, okay, what do you need me to do?
Yeah.
You're doing these projects.
Yeah. I think when it comes to anything that you see visibly with me in front of the camera, I can understand why people, if, you know, they don't understand the full story, they're like, oh, Me Too must have given her a script and she does this and that's it. But any projects that you've ever seen me in front of the camera, you know, I don't sign on. Like just recently I had a meeting with another company who wants me to come on to host a series, and I told them, I'm like, you can't really find me on IMBD. So if you want me on board, then you also have to bring me on board as either a writer or a producer.
Come on.
Because I'm that's not how I work. You
Right.
know? Like, I could have, and I've chosen not to. So, and it's also in my nature. It's kind of, I guess, my type A behavior where I'm like, I'm going to end up suggesting people that we should interview, and I'm going to end up suggesting locations that we should use, and, you know, all this stuff, which makes me a producer, and it's going to make the content better. So just give me that credit. Because I'm not just a pretty face, and
Thank you.
Yes, fuck it up.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I like so sort of like, because we're digging into this, but I love this, and when you're you're representing the Latinx community to the degree in which you can. I want to hear a little bit about some of the pushback that you get from our own community on the content that you're creating.
Pushback that I get from our community.
In terms of like, because there's one thing we can say about the cat call is that it's not afraid to be honest, even though it does so in a way that is not, it doesn't like block people off, right? Like it's not meant to be so like hardcore and like in your face. And if you're not down with this means you're ignorant. Like it doesn't call people out in a way where it labels them as one thing because they don't know something. It's an opportunity of like, hey, by the way, here's the facts, just presenting it. And here's the context as to why it's set up this way. And it's, hey, maybe not even necessarily your fault, but like, let's talk about it, right? And then there's some people who might be like, nah, how could you say that as a Latina? How could you do that as a Latina, even in our own community?
To give more background, I was hired by Me Too. This is now 3 years ago. And I was working there as a producer, meaning I had been making content that didn't involve me being in front of the camera at all. And the content that I was making as an East Coast Latina, because overwhelmingly amount of the folks who worked there were West Coast.
Right.
And that's what all of those platforms
Yes.
unfortunately. But.
Yes. I think except for Remezcla. But, and so when I came on, I was basically just highlighting a lot of the people that I felt needed to be amplified. And that so happened to be in the world of like digital Latinx representation, it happened to be more marginalized voices. So we're talking Afro-Latinos, we're talking like queer Latinos and or. And I realized that without intentionally doing it, I was disrupting the natural feed of that platform, right? Because if the majority of the producers were producing things from their perspective, aka West Coast, aka perhaps a Chicano, perhaps a Mexican perspective, mine wasn't that. And so these videos that I was making were really disrupting that feed. And what I mean by that is like the comments were really like, oh, you know, this is not what I came to Me Too for. Like, what the hell? Like, and a lot of like overt racism, a lot of overt homophobia. And so for me, when I was reading these comments, I was like, a lot of folks, my coworkers, were like, oh, don't let it get to you. Don't let it get to you. You know, like haters will be haters. Continue doing the work that you're doing, because the work I was doing was still getting a lot of views. But I felt like, one, these comments didn't have to do with me. I'm not in front of the camera, right? It was like the people, they were really criticizing, unfortunately, the people who were in front of the camera. And I felt like a big sense of responsibility as someone who had some kind of power as a content creator to kind of hold people's hands through a conversation. And so that's how the catcall came about. And so when you say things like, yeah, you know, the catcall isn't something where it's like in your face, you know, calling people ignorant or something like that, that's really intentional. Right. Because I personally, as someone who also holds like a lot of privileged identities, I feel it's my responsibility to put in that extra labor and that extra work to try to, you know, call in that community, you know, the non-Black, you know, folks, and explain to them colorism in order to take that labor away from folks who are already experiencing, let's say we're just using race and racism as an example, who are already experiencing racism, right?
Right.
So that's how the catcall came about, as a way to, what I say, hold our community's hand through a difficult conversation.
Yes, that's beautiful. And thank you for putting so much time and effort on behalf of the communities that are still part of your community, right? Even if they're like, you know, like for me as a Black woman, right, or Afro-Latina, because now we were talking a little bit offline about like using the term Afro-Latina versus just Black. And like, I often do say I'm Black. And I used to use it as a vehicle of people being like, no, you're not. And I used to be like, yeah, Afro-Latino. And then I would follow up with Afro-Latino as a like, boom, new term for your ass. Like, I am Black, right? And so, but like even communities like that, like even the opportunities you've given me to like come on board and support some of your projects like that.
Oh my God, I completely forgot. Julissa wrote for the catcall.
No, totally.
When I tell you that I have bad memory, you, like, honestly.
All good. No, but to say that like opportunities like that are important. And so I wanted to say that, only to say that it's not just the conversations that you hold for these other communities, it's the way in which you include them in your work that is super important, because when other people say no, right, when you have that like power in the room, you say yes. And so everybody else has to say yes. You know, or not has to. I know it's a battle, but even, which is why I'm saying it holds even more value, because it's not as simple as you snapping your finger and everyone's like, I'm on board. You have to advocate. And so I think it is important for people to really understand that side, because, you know, even like on your social media, you're awesome, you're engaging, you're fun, you're funny, like people know that. But I think people need to understand that all of that they get is also a result of a lot of hard personal labor and passing up on projects and things because you're upholding integrity, and that, you know what I mean, rather than just being like, well, I low-key need this come up, so I'm gonna act like that's not an issue and just take my come up and shut the fuck up. Like, that's not the person that you are. And so I respect the shit out of that. So
yes,
no
you.
one give me any more gin, because I swear to God,
because we're drinking gin and lemonade.
yes. So, Kat, we are about to go into our brunch questions. When you are out at brunch with the girls, what is your go-to bebida?
I love gin.
Same.
That's what we're drinking here.
Yes.
I've learned that it is very uncommon for women to drink gin.
Apparently.
Because every time I order gin at a bar, whenever there's a male bartender, which is usually the case, they'll always make a comment like, oh, gin, who taught you how to drink gin?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Gin
I
is
don't
a
know who
man's
taught
drink.
you how to drink anything. What are you talking about? But I love gin. And I like gin paired with anything that's like citrusy. So like, if there is good lemonade, I love a good gin and lemonade.
Yeah.
Which is what you all have provided me today.
Yes.
Which is why I'm going to be a mess.
I'm a gin girl too. I've gone through phases in my life. I went through a heavy whiskey phase where I was drinking Maker's Mark and ginger with everything because I thought it made me cool because I drank Maker's Mark. And then I moved to gin, and I've never jumped off of it. Like I don't see the end of my gin journey.
Do you see a difference between gin and vodka?
Absolutely.
All
There
right.
is a grand difference between gin and vodka.
Y'all are so fucking extra. Like,
to give people some background, prior to recording, Skittles had the audacity
Oh my God.
to say
Bitch had
that
audacity.
gin is just like vodka.
I meant this in the sense of, because I saw that y'all was pairing it. First off, I didn't see that in the new all the new Amsterdam bottles look the same until you look at the little band at the bottom that says gin or vodka. And
so you know that, but you decided to
and
assume before
I
reading.
thought that y'all were drinking vodka and lemonade, which is also a good refreshing pairing, which is why I said same thing.
Right.
To the gin and vodka and the vodka.
Right.
I mean,
so it's not
I'm
the
not
same
even know
thing.
what I'm
Skittles,
saying.
I love you, but just
it's
stop
not
taking
the same
yourself
thing. It is not the same thing. And I will say that for me with gin, like I could never drink a vodka soda. I've tasted them, I don't like them, but I can do a gin and soda endlessly. Like you can give me bottomless gin and seltzer and I'll take it.
This is why I particularly don't like vodka, because I think vodka for me was the entry as I think it's also for a lot
most
of people.
Because it's
when
the
you
cheapest.
First start drinking, what do you get at the club? You get the vodka cranberry.
Why I said it like that? Vodka cranberry.
So I feel like when I drink vodka, I'm automatically like, oh, flashback to like really bad times in my life where I was like, yeah, vodka cranberry.
Right. Yes.
I like a good vodka and juice. I like gin and juice. I like whiskey and juice. The things that I can't do anymore that give me bad flashbacks is like apple flavored any type of liquor. Like apple flavored rum or like
flavored like vodka. And it's always, see, that's my thing. Vodka tends to be the liquor that does the like peach, vanilla, like all this shit. And it's like, it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary.
Anyway, so when you're out to brunch, drinking your fucking gin and lemonade and not your vodka lemonade, what is your go-to favorite brunch plate?
Okay, because I've been anticipating coming to this podcast for 3 years. That's me throwing a lot of shade onto all of you all. But anyways, I'll say this. I'm a salty, savory type of bitch.
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't like sweets.
No pancakes and French toast.
I cannot do pancakes. I
No
can't do French toast. I can't
waffles.
do no waffles. It just feels very heavy to me. It's too much.
Not even
sweetness.
chicken and waffles?
I can't. I don't even like chicken and waffles. I know. Come for me.
Yeah.
Drag me. I'm here for it. So anything that is like more on the savory side, I can do. You know, the eggs Benedict. I like a good like ranchero type. Nice little mix of that. But I will call myself out and say, even though I don't like anything that's sweet, if I am at brunch with someone who orders something sweet, I do want to bite.
Wow. Because you just want a little taste. You don't want a whole plate.
You a biter.
I want a taste. But are you sharing your savory meal?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm a share.
Okay.
Yeah, but you better share at the same quantity.
Yo, I'm that bitch. I literally, when you said that, I was like, but you gotta even make sure that it's even, because like I'll share with you, but it gotta be an even exchange. We're not doing this.
But you can't like want half of my meal,
right? And it's also
that's equity,
and I have a shrimp rule. If I'm eating shrimp, everybody knows they be counting them little shrimp.
Yo.
You want to taste my plate with shrimp in it? You can't just have my shrimp. No, don't call Derek out.
The other day, what are you talking about? I'm not talking about Derek. I'm talking about the other day I ordered a shrimp or broccoli that came with 4 shrimps. And the rest was broccoli.
Wow.
Where was this called about?
In the Bronx. Wang Eastern.
Y'all
fucked up.
That's
because you ain't ordered.
And I'm tight because that's the Chinese restaurant that knows how to get into my complex and delivers to my door.
Wow. Yeah.
Like they have the fancy caller ID that they memorize your address.
Yeah.
4 shrimps.
4 shrimps. Did you call them?
Did you call? Yeah.
I didn't.
See,
you need to get white woman on there.
Always with my food orders, I get real Sarah real quick. I'm sorry, hi. I just made the order for blah 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 blah. Yeah, I don't believe it's for shrimp, right? Because I'm pretty sure, and I start going down that route, and then they just, I annoy them just to like.
Although I will say that I only use my like producer white woman tactics, you know, on a more, if it's like a family owned restaurant, then I'm like, all right,
yeah,
I'm gonna give you some slack.
Yeah,
but if it's like, you know, you're at brunch at this fancy place, I'm like, oh no.
If I'm paying $14 for this avocado toast, if I'm paying $14 for avocado and some motherfucking bread, you better believe I better have every fucking piece of whatever is supposed to come on here, the eggs, the everything. No, that definitely is a rule. But I will say, having one of my best friend's parents owns a Chinese food shop in the Bronx, and sometimes the shade be intentional. And because I know that, because he confirmed it for me, and obviously not all Chinese stores, but like
this specific one,
you know what I mean?
That's
but like,
crazy.
I don't put it past them. And also, and that now I'm saying this, I'm like, we need to have David on the podcast. But like, also there are ways in which the way that, you know, the Chinese community views the Black and brown communities in which they have these stores in always plays a role in how they're facilitating their business. And not to say that they're all racist, but some of them really, like, you know, think of these stereotypes as truths, and so they'll treat you a certain way, and you're not making it up in your head. So just that's the only reason when it's the Chinese food store, I'm like, nah.
That is a
Give me all my shrimp. It should have been 6 at least.
That is a real combo to be had.
That's a real conversation. Not right now.
Episode.
Not right now. So moving along, Kat, tell us a little bit about what it was like going out to eat when you were growing up.
Ooh, I forgot about this.
Yeah.
This question. Okay, so I have, I think, a weird. I grew up thinking of going out to eat a little differently than I think some of my peers, because to me, McDonald's was like fancy restaurant.
Same here, sis.
Like, my mom would always cook at home. Unfortunately, there was a lot of inequity at my house. My mom is a housekeeper. She worked really late hours. My father works as a packaging designer. Look it up. I didn't know what it was when I was growing up either. And he would get home at like a traditional hour, like 3, 4, 5. My mom would get home at 8. And unfortunately, due to gender dynamics, we would have to wait for her to get home to cook. Wow. But anyways, my mom would cook. And so we had meals at home, but on occasion, it was time to go out to eat.
Yes.
And so McDonald's to me was like, oh, this is for rich white people.
Yep, for real.
Or for example, when I would go with my mom to help her clean the apartments, these rich white people never had food in their refrigerators, but they had TV dinners. Right, like Hungry Man.
Yes,
I don't know if you're familiar with like the
I
Hungry
was.
Man meal.
Yes.
So I grew up thinking that TV dinners, and in particular Hungry Man, like I told you, I got bad memories, so the fact that I remember this is like a miracle. That the Hungry Man TV dinner was like, this is some classy shit.
Yes.
And little did I know that, like, no, ma'am, it is not. McDonald's is not classy. What your mom is cooking at home is way classier than that. But when we went out to eat, also, I would say that when we did go out to eat, my mom is Colombian and my father is Peruvian. And my mother, both of my parents have very different immigrant stories in the fact that my mom came here with her whole tribe. She's one of 7. She had her mother, her father, my grandmother, my grandfather here, and so she had very much a tribe here when she arrived. My father came solo, and his entire family is still in Peru. So when we went out to eat, there was also a special moment that would happen when we would go out and eat Peruvian food, because I would also see the joy in my father's face. And when my father would cook also at home, the very few times that he did growing up, it was like Peruvian dishes.
Right.
And so there was something very special about going out to eat at the Peruvian restaurants that we would eat at, because I saw the joy that it would bring to my father. It was a form that a way for my father to connect back to his roots and feel like he wasn't missing out. And I think I like caught on to that as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like a quick comment on like the whole like fast food dynamic being something that's fancy, like that was absolutely true for me as somebody whose mother also used to cook every day, blah, blah, blah. And I think that at some point in like, marketing history land, they caught on to that, like marketers for companies like McDonald's and stuff. And that's when we started to see a lot of explosion, like even around I'm Loving It, like when that campaign launched, like. And that was when McDonald's was trying to like redeem itself after all the lawsuits because of people saying I'm fat because of McDonald's. The Super Size Me. That's what I was. That's why I was like, what's the name of the thing? So Super Size Me. And I remember seeing like a surge in, because my mom would always on the TV with Univision was like stuck on my living room TV, and I would notice that. And in the moments of like, oh, we have a Latinx family, it would always be like this moment of like the kid being extra excited because it's so rare that they're about to step into this McDonald's and and like that and even sometimes when it's black families, but like when it was like more white targeted, I would never get that, like the narrative would feel a little different, but I can always feel the sense that they knew that it was special, so they would market it to us as
and
special.
Even the dollar menu, like shit like the dollar menu, when the dollar menu came out,
that was a huge deal. And I didn't my first time, okay, so Sorry, we're like talking about McDonald's, but
Not sponsored.
not sponsored.
Not
by.
sponsored.
Although, if you're trying to throw me some coin, but you know, for me, I think like I will never forget this. I was in middle school. I was in an after school program, and because we went on a trip really late, they gave the facilitator a stipend or petty cash rather, so that they can buy us food. So when we were in McDonald's, like they were like, "Oh, you guys have $15 each." And I remember being like, $15, that's mad money. Because every time I went with my mom, I was only allowed to get stuff from the dollar menu. $1 menu sandwich, fries, and if I wanted a sundae, that meant I wasn't getting a drink. Like it was like almost like a $3 before tax limit. So it was the first time in my life I was able to order something that was a numbered meal. And at the time, the chicken select strips had just
Oh
come
my
out.
God, I remember those too.
And it was like I don't think like it's so simple and silly, but like it was a moment of empowerment for me. One, because it was the first time I was able to make a food decision on my own, where my parents weren't having an opinion on what I'm picking. And I ordered the 5-piece instead of the 3 because I was like $15, so I could get the 5-piece. I could do, and it was like and it was like the most I think I had ever enjoyed McDonald's to date. And it was just more about having a different experience in this space where I always had one specific experience, you know. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
It's true, though.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can add one more anecdote. It would be that, you know how like grandparents are always alcahuetas? I don't know
Yes.
if that translates. Like, how do you say
Like-
that? They spoil you.
Yeah, yeah,
behind
I was
your
gonna
parents'
say-
back. And so my grandfather on my mom's side, I know he would always be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna take a Catherine al parque." And really what he would do was bring me to McDonald's. Like buy me, a meal from McDonald's, like the Happy Meal. And I'd be like,
Right.
oh my God.
Yes.
This is so special. I'm not supposed to have this.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. And so I was about to be like, okay, Catherine. I don't know why I was about to call you Catherine.
Catherine.
You
I
can call me that.
I channeled some ancestor of yours. It's like Catherine. All right. So what is your favorite bochinche topic to talk about over a meal?
I have 2. One is like personal relationships, sex.
Yes.
Always sex.
Sexual, adventures. And then the other one is always like industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's always I happen to have friends who are either content creators, producers, influencers, whatever, and there's always the close friends group on IG, let's just say, where you get the real cheese, man. You get the real dirt on what's happening.
I love that. I love that.